So it's been over 3.5 years since Putin launched his war into Ukraine, and for all intents and purposes, the front line is frozen. There have been over 1 million Russian casualties, and the flow of casualties, often as high as 1,500 in a single day, continues. Russia keeps striking Ukraine's civilian infrastructure, including electricity, water, hospitals, and schools. It really doesn't matter. Putin does not care. And when Moscow can't win on the battlefield, that's when it turns into a terrorist state. This is legitimate terrorism. Moscow's economy is far weaker than it was previous to the war, and Russia is severely isolated. Now, despite all of the evil that Putin has brought upon the Ukrainian people, Western nations still continue to offer him peaceful off-ramps, yet he takes none of them. Why is that, though? Well, because Putin's goal isn't territory or resources, it's his legacy. He wants to be remembered as a Tsar who restored Russian pride, no matter the cost in human life, and he wants a reckoning for the embarrassment he personally endured during the fall of the Soviet Union as a lowly KGB official. And then later, Russia was continuously dismissed as a non-entity on the global stage while he was in those leadership roles. But that's only part of it. It's becoming increasingly clear that Putin simply cannot end this war. It would be too personally and politically detrimental for him, and frankly for the Russian people. Putin has created a system where if he disappeared tomorrow, Russia would not know how to return to normal. This war has restructured the Russian economy into one centered entirely on militarization, and any cuts in defense spending would trigger a collapse. And if that collapse were actually caused by Putin deciding to end the war, it would lead to his demise. Moscow now spends more than $170 billion on defense, and that's about 8% of its gross domestic product. Additionally, they spend about 40% of their national budget on this war. Russia's defense industry at 8% GDP is equivalent to the entire US retail sector, which also makes up 8% of our GDP here in the United States. So Russia stopping this war would be equivalent to between 1/3 and 1/2 of all US retail stores closing. Around 4 million Russians work in the defense sector, with another 600,000 that were just added in the last 2 years. If those people lost their jobs, it would be the equivalent of Walmart, Amazon, and Home Depot laying everyone off at the same time. So now you start to realize why this war can't simply stop for Putin or really for Russia. There's no reasonable off-ramp for them. There is only victory or defeat, and defeat means complete collapse. The last time they were in a situation like this was in 1989 in Afghanistan, and it was part of the reason why the Soviet Union collapsed. Now, understand that people will counter what I'm saying by pointing out that throughout this war, Putin has caused unemployment to drop in Russia to 2% and average salaries to grow from 55,000 rubles to 85,000 rubles a month, which is about $1,000 US. And it looks like an economic miracle, but like Nazi Germany's wartime economy, it's an illusion built on state money, built on war manufacturing of bombs and rockets that don't serve the broader economy. They just blow up weeks after being built, and that kind of production does not work in a peacetime economy. Unlike before, when Russia was addicted to gas and oil exports, it's now addicted to military spending. If the war were to end, at least 2 million Russians would immediately lose their jobs on day one, with another 1.5 million losing them over the following year. In other sectors like cars, appliances, and domestic goods, many companies would not be surviving right now because of the embargoes and the sanctions, but the Kremlin keeps them afloat with constant subsidies. Many would go bankrupt overnight without that kind of support. And that means ending the war would require massive Western aid, and that just isn't going to come this time around. An even bigger problem is that the war has created a new class of oligarchs outside of Putin's old inner circle. Since 2022, 40% of the old billionaires that Putin used to rely on and leverage have now been replaced by new ones who are all tied to defense contracts and state industries. If that money stops, they'll turn on him. Their fortunes depend on the war machine continuing to run, and some have even created their own private militaries to ensure they are secured in that future. As I said in a previous video, the broader Russian economy is stagnating. Inflation is near 10%, and corporate debt has soared by 74%. Right now, only 4 of 20 industrial sectors are profitable, and 3 of them are tied to this war. Regions without military ties are collapsing. The Komi Republic's tax revenue has fallen by 54%, and that is just one of several regions in a freefall. Putin's Russia is trapped in a vicious cycle where war spending masks decline, but also prevents a recovery. And without foreign investment, without aid, or anyone having any confidence in the future of Russian stability, Russia is not going to heal, and as such, it's not going to survive long term in its current state. We are witnessing a repeat of the late 1980s Soviet Union in modern Russia. It took almost a decade for the chickens to come home to roost due to their decision making and the Soviet-Afghan war, but I don't think it's going to take that long when it comes to this Russia-Ukraine war. The problem is Putin has no off-ramp internally or externally, and so he has to keep kicking the can down the road, and that is why Putin cannot stop this war. So any attempts at brokering a peace with him are futile.